Last Tuesday, a complete stranger showed up at my door carrying a wooden box that my dead mother supposedly sent me. What I found inside didn't just change everything I thought I knew about her, it revealed a secret that explained why I've been having the same nightmare for 23 years. My name is Zoe Adams, I'm 28, and I work as a veterinary technician here in Portland. I'm the kind of person who saves injured birds and stays late at the clinic to comfort scared animals. But for the past decade, I've been struggling with something I can't fix or understand. Every single night, I have the same dream where my mother Anna calls for help, but I can never reach her in time. I always wake up with tears on my cheeks and her voice echoing in my ears. I live alone in my grandmother Marie's old Victorian house, the same house where my mother grew up. Marie passed away 2 years ago and left me this place. But honestly, it feels too big for one person. Every room holds memories of my mother, from the kitchen where she taught me to make pancakes to the reading nook where we used to curl up together during thunderstorms. I've been slowly working through decades of family belongings stored in the dusty attic, and it's like walking through a museum of my own life. The thing is, my father Chris remarried 5 years ago to a woman named Hannah. She tries her best, but she never knew my mother. Chris rarely talks about Anna anymore, and when he does, it's only in past tense, like she's a story that's already been told and closed. My younger brother Tyler was only 15 when Mom died, so his memories are fuzzy and incomplete. This leaves me feeling like I'm the only one keeping her memory alive, but also like I'm carrying a weight that's slowly crushing me. I thought I knew everything about my mother. I thought the car accident that killed her when I was 18 was just a terrible, random tragedy. I thought the nightmares were just my mind's way of processing grief that I never fully dealt with. But this wooden box sitting on my kitchen table proved that everything I believed about Anna Adams was a lie, and the truth she left behind is more dangerous and beautiful than I ever could have imagined. The box looks ancient, with intricate Celtic carvings that seem to tell their own story, and there are scratches on its surface that look deliberate, like someone carved symbols that have worn away over time. That Tuesday morning started like every other morning for the past 2 years. I woke up at 6:30 a.m. in my mother's old bedroom, the one I moved into after grandmother Marie died because my childhood room felt too small for all the grief I was carrying. The first thing I always do is make coffee. Not just any coffee, but the exact vanilla latte my mother used to make for me before school. I grind the beans by hand using her old wooden grinder. Add a splash of vanilla extract and steam the milk until it's perfectly creamy. The kitchen still smells like grandmother Marie's cinnamon rolls, even though she's been gone for 2 years. And somehow that smell, mixed with my mother's coffee ritual, is the only thing that makes me feel like I'm not completely alone in this massive house. The Victorian house has become both my sanctuary and my prison. I inherited it when Marie passed, and everyone expected me to sell it and move into something more practical for a single 28-year-old. But I couldn't let it go because this house holds 3 generations of my family's history. My great-grandmother built the garden that still blooms every spring. My grandmother painted murals on the walls that tell stories of our family's journey to America. And my mother carved her initials into the wooden banister when she was 12, right next to where I carved mine 20 years later. I've been working through Marie's belongings stored in the attic, and it's like archaeology of my own family. Last month, I found my mother's high school yearbooks where her friends wrote messages about how Anna was going to change the world someday. I found love letters my grandfather wrote to my grandmother during World War II and recipes written in my great-grandmother's handwriting for dishes I've never heard of. But every discovery just makes me realize how much I don't know about the women who came before me. The hardest part is my mother's room, which I've kept exactly as she left it 10 years ago. Her half-finished novels are still stacked on the nightstand with bookmarks holding her place in stories she'll never finish reading. Her closet is full of clothes that still smell like her perfume, a light floral scent that makes my chest tighten every time I catch a whiff of it. Sometimes I sit in her reading chair and try to imagine what she was thinking about in her final days, whether she knew something was coming, whether she was happy or scared or worried about leaving Tyler and me behind. My support system these days consists of 3 people who all have very different opinions about how I should be handling my grief. There's my best friend Jade Wilson, who I've known since college, and who thinks I need professional therapy to work through what she calls my unhealthy attachment to the past. Jade is practical and straightforward, the kind of person who believes every problem has a solution if you just face it head on. She comes over every Sunday with takeout and wine, and we sit in the kitchen while she tries to convince me to start dating again, or at least consider moving into a smaller apartment. Then there's my younger brother, Tyler, who was only 15 when Mom died and barely remembers her as anything more than scattered images and feelings. Tyler deals with loss by moving forward, never looking back, and he gets frustrated with me for what he sees as wallowing in memories. He's 25 now, works in tech, and lives in a modern apartment downtown that looks nothing like our childhood home. When he visits, which isn't often, he always suggests I sell the house and start fresh somewhere new. Tyler doesn't understand that this house isn't just where I live, it's where my mother's presence still exists. The most complicated relationship is with my stepmother, Hannah, who married my father, Chris, 5 years ago. Hannah is kind and patient, and she genuinely tries to understand my connection to my mother, but there's an awkwardness between us because she never knew Anna personally. She can't share memories or stories, and sometimes I catch her looking at my mother's photos with this expression like she's trying to solve a puzzle. My father rarely talks about my mother anymore, and when Hannah asks questions about Anna, Chris changes the subject or gives vague answers that don't really explain who my mother was as a person. The nightmares started about 6 months after the funeral and never stopped. Always the same dream where I'm running through a dark forest and I can hear my mother calling my name, her voice getting more desperate and frightened. I run faster and faster, branches cutting my face and arms, but I never reach her. I always wake up right before I find her, gasping and crying and feeling like I failed her somehow. Jade thinks the dreams are anxiety manifesting as guilt over not being able to save her from the car accident. Tyler thinks I just need to accept that she's gone and move on. Hannah suggests maybe I should talk to someone professional about grief counseling. But sitting there that Tuesday morning, grinding coffee beans and listening to the old house creak and settle around me, I felt like there was something I was missing, something important that everyone was overlooking. I had no idea that in about 2 hours a stranger would knock on my door and prove that my instincts were right. The doorbell rang at exactly 8:47 a.m. while I was grinding coffee beans for my second cup. I remember the time precisely because I glanced at the vintage clock on the kitchen wall, the one that's been keeping perfect time since my great-grandmother wound it every morning for 60 years. The sound startled me because nobody ever visits me that early, and I wasn't expecting any deliveries. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, thinking maybe it was a neighbor with a package or someone selling something I didn't need. Through the peephole, I saw an elderly man in his 70s standing on my front porch. He had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and calloused hands that spoke of a lifetime of manual work. He was wearing a simple brown jacket and holding a wooden box against his chest, like it was precious cargo. Something about the way he stood there, patient but purposeful, made me open the door even though every safety instinct told me not to let a stranger into my house. "Are you Zoe Adams?" he asked, and his voice was gentle but serious. When I nodded, he smiled and said, "My name is Robert Stone. Your mother asked me to give this to you when you were old enough to understand." He held out the wooden box, and I could see it was old and beautiful, covered in intricate Celtic carvings that looked like they told some kind of story. My heart stopped. "I'm sorry, but there's been some mistake. My mother died 10 years ago in a car accident." The words came out automatically, the same explanation I'd given to countless people over the years who didn't know about my loss. Robert's expression didn't change. He just nodded slowly and said, "Anna knew this day would come. She made me promise to find you when you were ready." The way he said my mother's name, with familiarity and warmth, sent chills down my spine. This stranger knew my mother, and not just knew her, but spoke about her like they had shared secrets. I stared at the box in his hands, my mind racing. "How do you know my mother? Who are you? What is this?" The questions tumbled out, but Robert just shook his head gently. "She made me promise to let the box speak for itself," he said, placing it carefully in my trembling hands. The wood was smooth and warm, heavier than it looked, and I could feel something shifting inside when I moved it. Then Robert reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a sealed envelope. My name was written across the front in handwriting that made my knees weak. It was my mother's handwriting, I was absolutely certain, not just similar or close, but identical down to the little flourish she always added to the letter Z in my name. I had kept samples of her writing, birthday cards and grocery lists and notes she left for me, and I knew every curve and loop by heart. But this was impossible because she had been dead for 10 years. "This can't be real," I whispered, turning the envelope over in my hands. "She couldn't have written this. She's been gone for a decade." Robert stepped back from my door, preparing to leave. "Anna was very specific about the timing. She said you'd know what to do when you were ready." He started walking down my front steps, and panic shot through me. "Wait," I called after him. "You can't just leave. I need answers. How did you know my mother? Where have you been for 10 years? Why now?" But Robert just turned back with that same gentle smile. "The answers you need are in that box, Zoe. Your mother was a remarkable woman who loved you more than you'll ever know. Trust her one last time." And then he walked away, disappearing around the corner before I could stop him. I stood in my doorway holding the box and envelope, my hands shaking so badly I was afraid I'd drop them. Neighbors were starting to leave for work, and I realized I was standing there in my pajamas, having what probably looked like a breakdown on my front porch. I hurried back inside and sat at my kitchen table, staring at these impossible objects that couldn't exist, but were sitting right in front of me. The handwriting was definitely my mother's, but the paper looked fresh, not 10 years old. The box was clearly antique but well-maintained, like someone had been caring for it all this time. I called in sick to work because there was no way I could focus on anything else until I figured out what was happening. I called Jade first, and she rushed over within 20 minutes, thinking I was having some kind of medical emergency. When she saw the box and envelope, she examined them carefully, confirming what I already knew about the handwriting. Then I called Tyler, who arrived skeptical and immediately started talking about elaborate scams targeting grieving families. Finally, I called my father, but when I mentioned Robert Stone, Dad got defensive and claimed he'd never heard the name before, which only made everything more confusing and frightening. By noon, I was sitting at my kitchen table with the two people I trusted most in the world, staring at evidence that everything I thought I knew about my mother's death might be wrong. After 3 hours of debate, examination, and increasingly frantic phone calls, I made the decision that would change everything. Jade thought I should take the box to the police. Tyler insisted it was an elaborate scam and wanted to throw the whole thing away, but something deep in my gut told me that my mother had planned this moment, and I wasn't going to let fear stop me from hearing what she had to say. I decided to open the envelope first. My hands were shaking so badly that Jade had to help me tear the seal without ripping the paper inside. The letter was written on cream-colored stationery that I recognized from my mother's desk, the expensive kind she only used for important occasions. The date at the top made my blood run cold. March 15th, 3 days before the car accident that killed her. "My dearest Zoe," the letter began, and I had to stop reading because seeing her words in her handwriting made the grief feel fresh and raw again. Jade squeezed my hand while Tyler paced behind me, muttering about how none of this made sense. I took a deep breath and continued reading. "If you're reading this, then Robert kept his promise, and you're finally ready to know the truth. I've been keeping a secret that I hoped I'd never have to share. But some secrets are too dangerous to take to the grave. By the time you read this, I'll be gone, and you'll have spent years thinking you knew who I was. The truth is more complicated than that." My heart was pounding so hard I could barely focus on the words. How could my mother have known she was going to die? How could she have written about her own death 3 days before it happened? Tyler stopped pacing and read over my shoulder, his skepticism wavering for the first time. The letter continued, "I need you to know that everything I did, every choice I made, was to protect you and Tyler and your father. The woman you knew as your mother was real, but she was only part of who I was. There are things about my life that I kept hidden because knowing them would have put our family in danger. Robert will explain more, but only if you choose to open the box." The letter ended with, "I love you more than all the stars in the sky, just like I used to tell you when you were little." Whatever you decide to do with what's in this box, know that my greatest achievement was being your mother. Trust your instincts, my brave girl. They've always been stronger than you realize. Jade was crying by the time I finished reading, and even Tyler looked shaken. We sat in silence for several minutes, each of us trying to process what we'd just heard. My mother's voice seemed to echo in the kitchen, as real as if she were sitting at the table with us. "This doesn't make sense," Tyler said finally. "How could she know she was going to die?" Car accidents are random. People don't predict their own deaths and leave mysterious boxes behind. But I was remembering things that hadn't seemed important before. How my mother had hugged me extra tight the week before she died, like she was memorizing the feeling. How she'd insisted on having a family dinner that Sunday, even though we usually just grabbed takeout. How she'd told me she loved me 3 times in our last phone conversation, when normally she just said it once before hanging up. She knew something was coming, I said quietly. I think she was trying to prepare us without scaring us. Jade wiped her eyes and looked at the wooden box sitting between us. "So what do you want to do?" "We could still take this to the police. They might be able to trace this Robert guy, figure out if this is legitimate." I picked up the box and felt its weight in my hands. The Celtic carvings seemed to shift in the afternoon light, and I could hear something inside moving when I tilted it slightly. Whatever was in there, my mother had trusted me to handle it. She'd waited 10 years for me to be ready, and I wasn't going to chicken out now. "I'm going to open it," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. For 10 years, I felt like there was something missing, something I didn't understand about who Mom really was. Those nightmares, that feeling like she was trying to tell me something, maybe this is why... Tyler shook his head. "Zoe, if this is going to mess you up even more than you already are, maybe we should think about this longer." "If this is going to mess me up, then I shouldn't be alone," I replied, looking at both of them. "Will you stay?" "Whatever's in here, I want you both to see it too." Jade nodded immediately, but Tyler hesitated before finally sitting back down. "Okay, but if this turns out to be some kind of sick joke, we're calling the police." I set up my phone to record the moment, partially for evidence and partially because I wanted to document whatever truth I was about to discover. Then I sat in my mother's favorite chair, the one that still had her indentation in the cushion, and prepared to meet the woman I thought I'd lost 10 years ago. I lifted the lid of the wooden box with trembling fingers, and the first thing that hit me was the smell. It was my mother's perfume, that light, floral scent I thought I'd never experience again, preserved somehow in the wood and fabric inside. But as I looked at the contents, my entire understanding of who Anna Adams was crumbled away like sand. The first item I pulled out was a passport, and my hands went numb when I saw it. The photo was definitely my mother, but the name read Anna Coleman, not Anna Adams. The birth date was different too, making her 3 years younger than I'd always believed. The passport was filled with stamps from countries I'd never known she'd visited: Romania, Czech Republic, Poland, Ukraine. According to these stamps, she'd traveled extensively throughout Eastern Europe just months before I was born. "That's impossible," Tyler whispered, leaning over my shoulder. "Mom never traveled anywhere. She was afraid of flying, remember?" But I was already reaching for the next item, a thick manila envelope containing bank statements from an account I'd never heard of. The deposits were staggering, $50,000 every month for years, coming from something called Meridian Consulting Services. The account had over $2 million in it when the deposit stopped, exactly 3 days before my mother's death. Jade picked up a stack of photographs that had been carefully wrapped in tissue paper. As she unwrapped them, we saw my mother in places I'd never imagined her being. There she was standing next to Robert Stone in what looked like Prague, both of them wearing serious expressions and winter coats. Another photo showed her with a group of people I didn't recognize, all of them gathered around a table covered in official-looking documents. In every picture, my mother looked different somehow, more alert, more guarded, like she was constantly watching for danger. But it was the small digital recorder at the bottom of the box that made my world completely shift off its axis. My hands shook as I pressed play, and suddenly my mother's voice filled the kitchen, clear and strong and impossibly present. "My darling Zoe, if you're hearing this, then something has happened to me, and Robert has kept his promise. I need you to understand that everything I'm about to tell you is true, even though it will sound impossible." I grabbed Jade's hand so tightly I probably bruised her fingers, but I couldn't let go. Hearing my mother's voice after 10 years of silence was like being struck by lightning. "I wasn't just your mother, sweetheart. I was a translator and coordinator for witness protection cases, specifically helping people escape from dangerous situations in Eastern Europe. My real name was Anna Coleman, and for 15 years before you were born, I helped families disappear when their lives were threatened by organized crime, corrupt governments, and human trafficking networks." Tyler dropped into a chair like his legs had given out. This was our mother, the woman who made us grilled cheese sandwiches and helped us with homework and worried when we stayed out past curfew. The idea that she had lived this secret, dangerous life seemed like science fiction. Robert Stone was my handler, my connection to the organization that funded and coordinated these operations. When I met your father, I was supposed to be on a routine assignment in Portland, just helping one family get settled with new identities. But I fell in love with Chris, and for the first time in my adult life, I wanted something normal and safe and real. My mother's voice grew softer, more emotional. "When I became pregnant with you, I made a deal with the organization. I would retire from active fieldwork, but I would maintain my cover identity as Anna Adams and provide support in safe houses when needed. Our family became my cover story. But you were also the most real and precious thing I ever had." The recording continued, and my mother explained that the car accident wasn't random. 3 days ago, I discovered that someone connected to a case I worked on years ago had found me. They were coming for me, and they were willing to hurt my family to get information. I saw them following me, Zoe. I knew what was going to happen. My chest felt like it was being crushed. My mother had died protecting us, and we'd never known we were in danger. "I've been having dreams about you calling for help," I whispered to the recorder, as if she could hear me. As if she had anticipated this, my mother's voice said, "You've probably been having dreams about me calling for help. That's because I need you to finish what I started, sweetheart. There's a woman named Sarah Mitchell hiding in Portland right now. She has a teenage daughter named Emma, and they're in terrible danger. At the bottom of this box, you'll find a key and an address. Sarah has been waiting for 10 years for someone from our organization to contact her, but everyone else who knew about her case is either dead or missing." The final words on the recording hit me like a physical blow. "You're the only one left who can save them, Zoe. You're the only one I trust with this responsibility. The choice is yours. But please remember that sometimes helping strangers is how we honor the people we've lost." The kitchen fell silent except for the sound of our breathing. I looked at my best friend and my brother, both of them staring at me with expressions of shock and concern, and something that might have been fear. At the bottom of the box, exactly as my mother had promised, I found a brass key and a piece of paper with an address I recognized from the east side of Portland. The silence that followed my mother's recording felt like the world had stopped spinning. I sat there holding a brass key and staring at an address that was only 20 minutes away from my house, trying to process that my mother had been living a double life for my entire childhood. The woman who taught me to braid my hair and insisted I eat vegetables had also been saving lives and dodging criminals across Eastern Europe. But more than the shock, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 10 years. Clarity. Those nightmares suddenly made perfect sense. They weren't just grief manifesting as anxiety like Jade had suggested, or my mind refusing to let go like Tyler believed. They were my subconscious picking up on the unfinished business my mother had left behind. She really had been calling for help, and I'd been hearing her across whatever divide separates the living from the dead. "This is insane," Tyler said, running his hands through his hair. "Our mom was like a secret agent or something, and now she wants you to go rescue some random woman and her daughter?" Jade was more practical, as always. "Zoe, even if this is all true, you're a veterinary technician, not a trained operative. You don't know anything about witness protection or dealing with dangerous people. This could get you killed. But I understood something they didn't. My mother's secretive nature, which had sometimes hurt my feelings as a teenager, wasn't about not trusting our family. She was keeping us safe from her secrets. Every time she'd been vague about her past or changed the subject when I asked about her childhood, she was protecting us from a world we couldn't handle. She wasn't keeping secrets from us. She was keeping us safe from her secrets. I called the number Robert Stone had given me, and when he answered, I simply said, "I opened the box." He arrived at my house within an hour, and this time he came inside and explained everything my mother's recording hadn't covered. He told me about the network of people who helped families escape impossible situations, about safe houses and new identities, and the careful coordination required to move people without leaving traces. He explained that my mother had been one of their best coordinators because she understood what it meant to want a normal family life. Sarah Mitchell and her daughter Emma have been hiding for 10 years, Robert told me. Sarah witnessed a murder committed by someone with connections to organized crime. She testified in exchange for protection, but the case fell apart and people started dying. Your mother was the last person who knew how to contact Sarah, and when Anna died, Sarah became invisible to our network. The decision felt inevitable, like my entire life had been leading to this moment. With Jade and Tyler's reluctant support, I drove to the East Side address that evening. The key opened a storage unit filled with emergency supplies, fake identification documents, cash, burner phones, and detailed instructions for helping people disappear safely. Over the next 3 months, I learned skills I never thought I'd need. Robert taught me how to spot surveillance, how to create believable cover stories, and how to move people without leaving digital footprints. I discovered that I had inherited more than just my mother's house. I had inherited her purpose and her responsibility to help people who had nowhere else to turn. Sarah Mitchell and her daughter Emma were successfully relocated to a small town in Montana where they could finally stop looking over their shoulders. Emma was able to finish high school and apply to college under her real name for the first time in a decade. Sarah cried when I told her my mother's story, and she said Anna had saved their lives twice, once 10 years ago, and again through me. The most surprising change was in my relationship with my father. When I finally told him what I'd discovered, he broke down and admitted he'd known about my mother's work all along. He'd been protecting the secret even after her death, afraid that knowing the truth would put Tyler and me in danger. For the first time since Anna died, we could talk about her openly, sharing stories and memories without the weight of hidden truths between us. My nightmares stopped completely, not gradually or partially, but immediately and permanently, like a switch had been turned off. I realized that my mother hadn't been calling for help because she was in danger. She'd been calling because she needed me to help Sarah and Emma. Once I answered that call, her voice in my dreams became peaceful and proud instead of desperate and frightened. The Victorian house transformed from a shrine to the past into headquarters for continuing my mother's mission. I still work as a veterinary technician, but now I also help people who need to disappear for their safety. I've discovered that saving animals and saving people require many of the same skills: patience, compassion, and the ability to stay calm in crisis situations. I always thought I lost my mother in that car accident 10 years ago, but the truth is, I found her that Tuesday morning when a stranger handed me a wooden box. She'd been waiting all this time for me to be ready to meet the real Anna Coleman, and to understand that sometimes the people we love most are the ones we know the least, and that's not always a bad thing. Sometimes love means keeping dangerous secrets so the people you care about can sleep safely at night. The greatest gift my mother left me wasn't the house or the money in those secret accounts. It was the knowledge that my life could have meaning beyond my own happiness. Every person I help find safety and start over is a way of honoring her memory and continuing the work she died protecting. If this story moved you, or if you've ever wondered about the secrets the people you love might be keeping to protect you, please share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment telling me about a time when you discovered something unexpected about someone important to you. And if you want to hear more stories about family secrets and the connections that transcend death, subscribe to this channel because I have more truth to share.